Carmilla, or Carmilla, A Play in One Act, is a 2014 stage play adaptation of Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu's 1872 novella Carmilla, as penned by David MacDowell Blue. Never having seen another stage adaptation to Carmilla, I don't have a lot to compare it to, though I imagine I will when the Carmilla web series adaptation to the stage comes out. I was decently entertained by it. It feels like a bridge between the oppressive traditionalism of the original novel and the mind-blowing progressivism of the web series, staying true to the conservative setting of the original version, while winking to the audience with a presentation of modern sensibilities of lesbianism and women's capabilities.
I was terrified, as you might imagine.
The most overt change from the novel is a period shift from approximately 1835 to 1938, while keeping geographically static. Isolated Styria of the Austrian Empire becomes isolated Styria of Nazi Germany. This allows for more audience familiarity with dialogue, set pieces, and themes that aid in comprehension of the subject.
That is something else suited to the times. It's a hard world, young miss, filled with dangers. There's this one family I know. Well, I used to know. Never mind, it's not a pleasant story.
While Le Fanu wrote for a readership that would understand the setting of Styria during the Austrian Empire, as within a police state and automatically feel tension, modern American audiences would wonder if they remembered hearing about the Austrian Empire at all.
You can't tell it like that, like some boring history lesson. This is dangerous, this is exciting.
So the transplant into Nazi Germany does a lot to impart that atmosphere of tension. When a referenced friend of the protagonist's father enters in full Nazi regalia, the impact is immensely more threatening than if he were simply a referenced officer of the Austrian Empire. And did we cover that in history class? Whenever Nazis and vampires share the stage, I think there should be a moment to reflect on whether or not the narrative contributes to anti-Semitism. Vampires fit the Nazi conception of Jews as parasitic invaders holding unearned power, lining up so much with anti-Semitic caricatures that the 1922 Dracula adaptation Nosferatu, arguably the best vampire movie of all time, incorporates anti-Semitic imagery into Count Orlok with his bushy eyebrows, long fingers, and hooked nose, and casts his Renfield as a greedy real estate boss endangering Germany by guiding him in. It can be considered proto-Nazi propaganda. Many vampire depictions contain similar problematic elements, such as the Hebrew-speaking vampire authority of True Blood, conspiring to turn humanity into food as dictated in their evil scripture, while they present as a harmless minority seeking equal rights. Separating the vampire from anti-Semitism is no easy task, but the play handles it more elegantly than the web series does, with their Nazi Germany parallel in Season 2. In the web series, an ostensibly harmless German man turns out to be an evil fascist who wants to kill every vampire, forcing them to hide under floorboards, equating the plight of the vampires with that of the Jews in Nazi Germany. It doesn't quite work because these vampires have been shown to be brutal killers.
We're vampires. A certain amount of murder just comes with the territory,
making the desire to kill them totally justified. And it's a problem when the Nazi-Jew conflict is portrayed as at all ambiguous, an issue that is especially relevant these days. The play deals with this better by making the vampires just a general localized supernatural threat, external to the conflict, and suggesting that the Nazis are after them to steal their power, in a connection to the occult rumors surrounding the Nazis. The closest parallel to the real world is that the play's Nazis fighting vampires are like Nazis fighting the Soviets, who are in themselves dangerous and not the sort of people you want holding power. So, thumbs up on its use of Nazis and vampires. The plot framing is that after the war, a British officer comes to Laura Fontaine's apartment to clarify some details of her story before she is allowed to immigrate to England, and Laura recounts what happened with Carmilla to the best of her memory. The original novel does a similar thing with the framing, saying that the story is a recovered letter to an unnamed English correspondent. The Laura of the book takes a consistent, polite tone, and you can read between the lines and understand that her interpretation of Carmilla is friendlier than she lets on. But it's largely left ambiguous what was really going on. Was Laura into Carmilla's advances, or truly horrified by them as she was with Carmilla's vampirism? The play clarifies this with Laura's body language and tone. She projects to the audience, standing apart from the British officer, who offers sporadic commentary, and she is more or less integrated with the plot of the story. Characters from the past are frozen in a bubble, unaware of Laura's actions in the present, and are only playing out her memory. This makes it clear when Laura is stretching the truth. She may say something sarcastically, making it understood to the officer that she doesn't really believe it, but characters in the memory will respond to the earnest way that she actually said it. Or she can tell the officer that she has no idea what Carmilla's seductive actions meant, while enthusiastically joining the scene and very clearly understanding and enjoying it. The aspect of the novel that I think is hardest for modern readers to appreciate is Laura's lack of agency when Carmilla is being all predatory. It's hard to ship Laura and Carmilla when Laura is a naive girl and Carmilla is an experienced femme fatale seductress who fang rapes her at night. Their top-bottom dynamic is accentuated with a huge power disparity. Though the homophobic 1970 film adaptation The Vampire Lovers is cheesy pandering to the straight male audience, it's hard not to see the exploitative Carmilla-Laura dynamic there as representative of Le Fanu's twisted romance. The Carmilla web series counters this by making Laura a spunky wannabe investigative reporter who leads her friends in investigating a local series of disappearances, while slowly falling for her annoying roommate Carmilla, and only going out with her after discovering she's a vampire as part of a trick to trap her and torture her for information. Laura becomes the top in a goofy supernatural action piece, and then falls for her and chooses to release her, after which they function at an equal level. The play stays truer to the original while adding nuance. Through the device of Laura projecting to the audience, we get a sense of an inexperienced, but not naive, young woman who understands Carmilla's seduction and is giddy about it. Her words describing Carmilla coming into her room to fang rape her at night are given new context by her body language and tone, and are instead understood as a cover to hide the fact that they were sleeping together with a little biting, and that Laura was enthusiastically consenting. The whole evil vampire story of the novel is portrayed as a cover to hide a consensual lesbian relationship.
Something new, yet familiar. Like the cold, deep thrill one feels while swimming, while we move our bodies against the current of a river.
In an interesting similarity with the web series, the two of them share an intimate scene where Carmilla teaches Laura how to dance. In the web series, Carmilla teaches Laura the waltz and says that in 1698 it might as well have been sex. In the play, Carmilla teaches Laura to tango, and similarly asks her if she knows how to waltz, with a sexual subtext, akin to Doctor Who's question if the Doctor ever dances.
You telling me you do dance?
900 years old, me. I've been around a bit. I think you can assume at some point I've danced.
The play toys with the top-bottom dynamic by having Carmilla teach Laura how to lead, subtextually allowing her to become experienced with the top position.
Would you like to lead for a time?
No. You.
The play further emphasizes the lesbian liberation element by having Laura insincerely agree to follow Carmilla's lead, and being obedient to her father following his request that they not dance. She will neither obey nor follow. In this way, Carmilla is made to be less of a sexy, dominant monster trope, and more of a well-rounded lesbian, similar to her mundane human portrayal in the 2014 Carmilla film adaptation, The Unwanted.
Is it any wonder I'm so pleased to visit such a wonderful and alien land, and to walk with she, who is like unto an angel to me?
Are you then some sort of devil?
Carmilla's evil is largely made ambiguous. She is still probably a vampire whose family dropped her off to prey on the locals, and she's a classist jerk who threatens violence to a harmless impoverished Romani man who annoys her by poking holes in her story and or being rude. But her bad side is attributed to human flaws more than ties to the devil. Or if there are ties to the devil, it's a modern spunky sex, drugs, and rock and roll conception of the devil. Laura calls her out on her mean-spirited behavior, and Carmilla almost apologizes but is still very proud. She's closer to an unaffiliated true-blood vampire than the pure monster she was in the book. In her relationship with Laura, she is a very gentle seductress who helps Laura along with only the hint of exploitation in the backstory, where Carmilla visited her as a child to bite her and then retreat. There is a bit of a creepy child grooming vibe to it, but much more ambiguous than in the book, especially where the whole supernatural element is thrown into question. In another deviation from the book, the play makes it ambiguous whether or not there is anything supernatural going on at all. It is suggested that the Nazi antagonist, Colonel Spielsdorf, based on the book's General Spielsdorf, is just flat out crazy, and convinced Laura that Carmilla was a vampire when she was just a seductive lesbian with a few quirks. The British officer has papers that contradict his story, and you would think that he would be a better authority than a possibly crazy Nazi in a possibly unreliable narrative. But there are other things that don't quite make sense if Carmilla weren't a vampire. The supernatural explanation doesn't quite work with the British officer's evidence either.
Coincidence, nothing more.
What there is an atmosphere of ambiguity, where Laura experiences a sexual awakening with the arrival of a mysterious girl during the tragedy of the Third Reich. It doesn't have to be entirely coherent to be a compelling narrative.
What do you think was the truth? About Carmilla? Who was she?
After Laura finishes her tale of the strange girl Carmilla's arrival and her tragic death at the hands of a crazy Nazi, the British officer determines her fit to immigrate to England. As he takes his leave, Laura's roommate Ingrid returns. Ingrid is a newscaster who generally sticks around in the background and who is highlighted to make announcements on the radio detailing the state of affairs. And now we learn that she is actually a Vordenberg, the descendant of an ancient vampire-killing hero. In the book, Vordenberg is an intimidating male authority figure on the order of Spielsdorf who helps him in his efforts to kill Carmilla. The web series spins him as an analog for Hitler and uses his male authority to build him as a villain for the feminist subversion of LeFanu's conservatism, much as the play does with Spielsdorf. Arguably, the play takes the feminist subversion one step farther by making Vordenberg a doppelganger for Carmilla as a young woman with ties to ancient Styria who functions as a second love interest for Laura following Spielsdorf's murder of Carmilla. There is an interesting thing that this particular production chose to do that is not in the script, where Ingrid reacts when Carmilla is apparently hurt by the sound of hymns being sung, suggesting that Ingrid may be some kind of supernatural counterpart to Carmilla, further indicating that Ingrid would be a suitable replacement for her and Laura's life. Funnily enough, the web series would do something similar with making General Spielsdorf a feminist figure as a young woman, Betty, originally Carmilla's victim, who in the book is Berta Reinsfeld, the ward of the male authority figure General Spielsdorf, now the leader of a civilian militia, sending college students to fight the forces of hell off-screen.
For those of you willing to join the front lines, bring whatever weapons you can find. We will not go into the dark without a fight.
The fact that this production chose to cast a woman in the role of the British officer, a man, does a similar thing as the web series turning General Spielsdorf into the young woman. It makes this scene stand out as a testament to female strength as projected to the audience. Laura is finally out from underneath her father's thumb and is sharing an apartment with a woman with lesbian overtones. The woman in question is almost as interesting as Carmilla, and the casting of a woman for the British officer emphasizes the notion that women can be powerful. The officer leaves, and the play ends on the ambiguous note, where Laura either makes out with Ingrid, or else bites her because Carmilla made her into a vampire. Vampirism is used as code for lesbianism and sexual dominance. While this trope is often used to demonize lesbians, the play's interpretation elevates the trope to sweetly gothic sensuality. The repugnance associated with the idea of a vampire biting people is used to demonize Carmilla in the most straightforward reading of the novel, and in many other adaptations, like The Vampire Lovers. But the play uses it as queerness to create a protective bubble where lesbian couples Laura and Carmilla, and Laura and Ingrid, can have their sweet romances. Perhaps most notably, the top position is not associated with mean traits or women acting like men, but is instead associated with Laura's sexual maturity, where Carmilla teaches her to accept it. The web series goes to efforts to make Laura and Carmilla not take a specific role and switch back and forth, but if a lesbian vampire story were to focus on only one partner having sexual dominance, like 99% of lesbian vampire stories in existence, it could stand to learn something from the play. All in all, it's an enjoyable gothic romance. I would recommend it to anyone capable of catching a performance. While certainly different from the Carmilla web series, I think most fans could find a lot to like in it.
How many monster.
Please like, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and send me an email if you want to commission a video review, and click the link below to support me on Patreon. Pledges of $5 or more will earn you a special thank you at the end of each video. Thank you, and please check out my related videos.